The morning Logan Hurst walked into that tryout, he had $43 in his checking account, a 7-year-old daughter with a loose front tooth, and absolutely nothing left to lose. He hadn't planned on going. His buddy Ray had texted him the flyer at 2 in the morning, Blackfield Security Group. Open recruitment. Executive protection positions. No prior agency experience required. And Logan had laughed out loud in the dark of his apartment, careful not to wake Bree. Laughed the way a man laughs when the joke is his own life. He was a former Army Ranger turned freight loader at a distribution center in Columbus, Ohio, pulling overnight shifts because the day rate was worse and Bree's after-school program cost $400 a month. He was not exactly the target market for executive protection work. But then the distribution center called him at noon the next day and told him not to come in, or ever again. Budget cuts. Very sorry. HR would mail the paperwork. Logan sat on the edge of his bed for a long time after that call. The apartment was quiet. Through the thin wall, he could hear the television in the unit next door. He looked at the framed photo on the dresser. Bree at 6, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera like she owned the world, her dark curls spilling out from under a winter hat 2 sizes too big for her head. Her mother had taken that photo. Her mother was not in the picture and not in their lives and hadn't been for 3 years. Logan looked at the photo. Then he picked up his phone and texted Ray back. "What time does it start?" The Blackfield offices were on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown, the kind of building where the lobby smelled like fresh flowers and nobody smiled at you unless you were wearing the right watch. Logan wore a Casio he'd had since Fort Benning. He took the elevator up with 2 other guys, both of them younger, both of them built like they'd never missed a day in the gym, one of them wearing a shirt that probably cost more than Logan's car payment. The room they were shown into held maybe 30 men, a few women. Logan found a seatsome along the wall and assessed the room the way he'd been trained to, cataloging exits, expressions, body language. Most of the guys here looked like gym floor recruiters or off-duty cops. A handful looked like ex-military. Logan recognized the posture, the particular way they held themselves when sitting, still without being stiff, aware without looking like they were watching. A man in a slate gray suit came in and introduced himself as Harmon, head of recruitment. He explained the structure. Blackfield was expanding its executive protection division. They were looking for 8 people to fill new positions, field agents for high-value clients, primarily C-suite executives and their families. The starting salary, Harmon said, was $94,000. The room got quiet. Logan had not made $94,000 in any calendar year of his adult life. Harmon explained the evaluation process. There would be a written assessment, a physical screening, and a scenario-based demonstration. Candidates would be evaluated over the course of the day. Those who moved forward would be contacted within 72 hours. The man in the expensive shirt leaned over toward his friend and said something low and confident. They both looked at Logan, at his Casio, his off-brand button-down, the slight shadows under his eyes from 6 months of overnight shifts, and they smiled. Logan looked back at them. Then he looked at the wall. He thought about Bree's tuition, her loose front tooth, $43. He uncapped his pen and waited for the written assessment to begin. The physical screening was in a room 2 floors up. There was a pull-up bar, a weighted sled, a timing course through a set of padded obstacles, and at the end of it, a sparring component. Harmon explained that the sparring wasn't about who could fight the hardest. It was about how candidates responded to physical pressure, whether they stayed composed, whether they protected their principle, whether they made good decisions when someone was actively trying to take them apart. The principal in the scenario, Harmon said, was a weighted mannequin in a sport coat. The candidate's job was to get the mannequin from point A to point B while a designated aggressor tried to stop them. The aggressor was one of Blackfield's own agents, a former MMA fighter named Stokes, who, based on his dimensions, had apparently been assembled in a laboratory somewhere. The man in the expensive shirt went third. He was athletic, fluid, clearly trained. He made it 70% of the way through the course before Stokes took him down with what looked like almost no effort. The expensive shirt got grass stains on it from the gym mat. Logan noticed he didn't look quite so smooth after that. Logan went 8th. He picked up the mannequin, felt the weight of it, maybe 180, roughly the weight of a real adult, and carried it like he'd carried a lot of things in a lot of places over the years. When Stokes came at him, Logan didn't try to fight back the way most of the candidates had. He absorbed the contact, turned his shoulder, used Stokes' momentum to step around rather than through. He kept moving. He kept the mannequin upright. Stokes hit him harder the second time. Logan felt it in his ribs and did not stop moving. He got the mannequin to the end point. Harmon made a note on his clipboard. On the way back, one of the younger guys who'd been watching said something under his breath to the man next to him. Logan caught the word lucky. He didn't say anything. He just rolled his shoulder once to ease the ache from where Stokes had connected and went back to his chair. At 5 o'clock, Harmon told them they were done for the day. He thanked them for their time. He said they'd be in touch. Logan drove home. He picked Bree up from the school's aftercare program. She was the last kid there, drawing at a table with one of the aides while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and she ran to him and showed him her loose tooth, wiggling it with her tongue, eyes wide with the drama of it. "It's almost out," she announced. "Almost," Logan agreed, and picked her up and tried very hard not to calculate how many nights were left before the $43 ran out. They called on the second day. Logan was in the parking lot of a grocery store when his phone rang, standing outside because the reception inside was bad and he'd been waiting on a call about a possible temp job doing moving labor. It was not that call. It was Harmon. Logan was being offered a position. Was he still interested? He stood very still in the parking lot with people pushing carts past him and the Ohio sun doing nothing useful overhead, and he said yes. His first assignment was personal protection for the principal's daughter during a corporate conference in Chicago. The principal was Edmund Vance, the founder and majority owner of Vance Industrial, a man whose company made components for aerospace and defense systems, and who in the past 18 months had received 3 credible threats related to a federal contract dispute with a competitor. Blackfield had been managing Vance's security for 2 years. This was routine. Logan's job was Eleanor, Edmund Vance's youngest daughter, 26, a graduate student who apparently spent most of her time in a university lab, and had not been consulted about any of the security arrangements made on her behalf. Logan understood this within approximately 4 minutes of meeting her. "I want to be very clear," Eleanor Vance said, when Harmon introduced Logan in the lobby of the Vance family's Chicago residence, "that I find this entire situation completely unnecessary, and I'm only cooperating because my father has the emotional range of a spreadsheet, and this is apparently the hill he's chosen." She was small, wore glasses, and had the kind of direct gaze that people develop when they're used to being underestimated. Harmon said something diplomatic. Eleanor looked at Logan. "Do you actually need to follow me everywhere, or can we set some ground rules?" "Ground rules are fine," Logan said. She blinked. She had clearly been expecting something different. "Okay, good. So you don't need to be in my room. I don't need to be in your room, and you don't need to announce yourself every time I turn a corner. I can hang back. And if I want to have a conversation without you standing 3 feet away, I can give you space. I just need line of sight." Eleanor Vance studied him for a moment. Then she nodded, once, like they'd concluded a negotiation. "Fine. What's your name, Logan?" "Logan." She tried it like she was filing it somewhere. "I'm Eleanor. Don't call me Ms. Vance. It sounds like a nursing home." The conference was 3 days. Logan did his job and stayed out of Eleanor's way, which was easier said than done because Eleanor moved with the restless efficiency of someone who was always behind on something and had made peace with it. She went to her father's presentations, to dinners she clearly found excruciating, to sessions in the hotel business center where she sat with a laptop and worked on whatever her dissertation research involved. Logan didn't ask. He stayed close enough to respond and far enough to be forgettable. On the second night, she found him outside the banquet hall where some dinner was happening that she'd slipped away from early. "You have a kid," she said. Logan looked at her. "Yes, how old?" "7. I saw the photo in your jacket pocket." She paused. "I wasn't snooping. It fell out when you reached for your radio. She looks like you. People say that." Eleanor leaned against the wall beside him. She'd taken off the heels she'd been wearing all day and was holding them by the straps. Her feet were on the hotel carpet in just her stockings. "Is it hard, doing this job with a kid at home?" It was a direct question, honestly asked. Logan thought about Bree at the aftercare program, the last one there, drawing at the table under the fluorescent light. "Most things worth doing are hard," he said. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father's worth doing, even if he doesn't know how to say it." And she put her heels back on and went back into the dinner. Logan stood there in the hallway and felt something shift slightly in his chest, like a gear finding its place. Edmund Vance, Logan gathered over the following months, was not a demonstrative man. He was precise, controlled, and operated with the particular intensity of someone who had built something from nothing and could not stop building. He acknowledged Logan's presence the way he acknowledged most things in his immediate environment. Efficiently, without sentiment. Logan was fine with that. He was there to do a job. But Vance watched Logan work. Not in a way that most people would notice. Logan noticed because Logan noticed everything. The principal's attention, the tilt of a head, the slight delay before Vance turned to say something to Harmon after an incident in a parking structure where Logan had put himself between Vance and a man who turned out to be confused, not threatening, but who'd moved too fast and too close. Logan had stepped in, assessed, de-escalated. No drama, no scene. Vance had watched that and said nothing, and 2 weeks later requested Logan specifically for his personal detail. Harmon told Logan this over the phone. Logan was in Bree's school parking lot waiting for her class to let out. "He asked for you by name," Harmon said. Logan watched the school doors through the windshield. He thought about the freight center, the overnight shifts, the $43. "I'll do it," he said. The threats against Edmund Vance were not abstract. Logan learned this in pieces, the way you learn most things in close protection work. Not through formal briefing, but through proximity. Through what you hear in corridors. Through what changes in the posture of the people around a principal when certain names come up. The federal contract dispute involved a competitor named Arcturus Systems. Arcturus had lost a significant government contract to Vance Industrial the previous year, a contract worth somewhere north of $200 million. The dispute had become litigation. The litigation had become personal, and somewhere in the personal, someone had made a decision that legal pressure was not moving fast enough. The first 2 threats had been letters. The third had been something else. Logan was not read into the full details of the third threat, but he was told enough to understand that the scope of his job had changed. Edmund Vance had a daughter who moved around a city in graduate school, taking public transit, working late in labs, walking home from the library at night. Logan thought about Eleanor and her bare feet on the hotel carpet and the unsentimental way she'd said my father's worth doing. He thought about the gaps in her current security arrangement, which was, as far as he could tell, approximately nothing. He brought it up to Harmon. Harmon agreed. Harmon brought it to Vance. Vance said Eleanor would never agree to a full-time protection detail. Logan said he'd handle it differently. Eleanor, to her credit, did not make it easy. She agreed to check-ins. She agreed to a protocol for late nights on campus. She drew the line at Logan, attending her department seminars, and held that line with the firmness of someone who'd written a 17-page agreement and had no intention of amending it. Logan did not attend her department seminars. He stood outside the building where they were held. This was, he recognized, technically outside the scope of what she'd agreed to. He also recognized that the threat environment had changed and that Harmon had quietly signed off on the extended coverage without telling Eleanor about the third threat, which was information that was above her father's comfort level to share with her. Logan thought this was probably a mistake, but it was not his call. For 2 months, this arrangement worked. Eleanor worked. Logan stayed in the background. Bree came to school and grew her tooth back in. He'd taken a photo on his phone, her holding the lost tooth up in her palm and grinning enormously, and the Vance Industrial contract dispute moved through its legal phases. Then, on a Thursday night in November, someone was waiting outside Eleanor's building. Logan saw him first. He almost always saw things first. It was a habit installed over years and multiple deployments and refined into something almost involuntary. The scan, the assessment, the categorization of variables. The man outside Eleanor's building was trying to look casual and was not quite succeeding. He was positioned at an angle that covered both the building entrance and the street approach. He was wearing a jacket too thin for the temperature and had been there longer than someone waiting for a cab or a friend would wait. Logan walked Eleanor out through a side entrance he'd scoped 2 weeks earlier and never mentioned. She noticed immediately. "This isn't the usual way? No? Why? Someone out front I didn't like the look of." Eleanor processed this. She was quiet for half a block before she said, "Was it connected to my father?" Logan considered how much to say. "I don't know yet, but you think so." He didn't answer. She took the non-answer as an answer, which it was. They walked in silence for most of a block. Then Eleanor said, "How long has there been an elevated threat level?" Logan said, "A while." She stopped walking. Right there on the sidewalk in the November cold, she stopped and looked at him with those direct, calm eyes. "How long? Since the third communication," he said. Her jaw tightened, not with fear, with something closer to controlled anger. "And my father decided not to tell me. He was trying to protect you by not giving me information that affects my own safety." She turned and started walking again, and when she spoke, her voice was level and precise. "That's not protecting me. That's managing me. Those are different things." Logan had nothing to offer against that. She was right. He'd thought the same thing. He said, "Yes." Eleanor walked. "They turned a corner," she said without looking at him. "Thank you for not lying about it." The man outside her building was, as it turned out, connected to a private investigation firm that Arcturus had retained. He was not, as far as Blackfield's investigation determined, there for anything violent. He was there to establish Eleanor's schedule, her routines, the texture of her daily life in a way that could be used as leverage in the dispute. Not physical leverage, the kind that says we know where your family is and we know when she's alone. Edmund Vance, when he was told, went very quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Tell me what you need." Logan told him. Increased residential coverage, a protocol change for Eleanor, and a conversation, a real one, between Edmund and his daughter without the filter of Blackfield intermediaries and without the instinct to manage. Vance looked at him. "You're telling me how to talk to my own daughter." "I'm telling you what's going to keep her safe," Logan said. "She needs accurate information. People who don't have accurate information make decisions that look irrational from the outside, but make complete sense from where they're standing. She's smart. She'll cooperate better if she's not working around a gap." Vance was quiet again. Logan waited. "You have a daughter," Vance said finally. It wasn't quite a question. 7 years old. I'd tell her what she needed to know in terms she could handle. Yes. Something shifted in Edmund Vance's expression. It was small and quickly contained, but Logan had been watching Edmund Vance for months and he caught it. "All right," Vance said. Logan was not in the room for the conversation between Edmund and Eleanor. He didn't need to be. He saw the evidence of it the next day. Eleanor was calmer, not in the absence of fear way, but in the way of someone who finally has all the variables and can work with them. She stopped navigating around the security arrangements. She started working with them. She also started talking to Logan differently. Not more. Eleanor was not verbose by nature, but with fewer barriers. They developed a rhythm. Short exchanges in transition times, the few minutes between one location and another. She asked questions when she had them, and he answered what he could answer and was honest about what he couldn't. One afternoon in December, she asked about Bree. He told her, "The way you tell things to someone you've been in proximity with for long enough, that trust becomes a structural fact rather than a decision." He told her about Bree's mother, who had been 23 and overwhelmed and had left a note in a car seat and had called twice in the first year and not since. He told her about learning at 31 that single parenthood felt like being handed a manual in a language you'd never studied and being expected to pass a test on the first day. He told her about the overnight shifts and the aftercare program and the $43 and the morning he'd walked into the Blackfield tryout because he had nothing left to lose. Eleanor listened. She was a good listener. Not passive, not performing attention, but genuinely processing. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "She's lucky. She doesn't always think so," Logan said. He meant it as a light thing, a small joke. Eleanor shook her head. "Seriously. She has a father who showed up. That's not nothing. That's actually most of it." Logan looked out the windshield at the gray Chicago street and didn't say anything. He filed it somewhere he wouldn't examine too carefully for a while. The Arcturus situation resolved the way these things usually resolve. Not with drama, but with paperwork. The federal investigation into Arcturus's conduct in the contract process moved forward. 3 executives were named. The private investigation firm cut its engagement. The threat level, Harmon told Logan in January, was formally downgraded. Edmund Vance called Logan into his office the day after the downgrade was communicated. It was the first time Logan had sat down across from him without a security context. Vance's office was on the 42nd floor of the Vance Industrial Building, which on a clear January morning offered a view of the lake that looked like something from a magazine. Logan sat in the chair across from Vance's desk and did not look at the view because Vance was looking at him, and Logan had learned that Edmund Vance's attention was a thing you respected. "I want to talk about your role going forward," Vance said. Logan waited. "The threat context has changed. Your current assignment designation no longer applies in the same way." Vance paused. "I'm not terminating your contract. I'm expanding it. I'd like to bring you in at the director level, head of personal security for myself and my family. Your salary would reflect the position." Logan said nothing for a moment. Outside the window, the lake was steel gray and enormous under the winter sky. "Why?" he said. Vance looked at him steadily. "Because you're good at your job. Because you're honest when honesty is inconvenient. Because you told me to talk to my daughter, and you were right, and I'm not accustomed to people on my payroll telling me things I don't want to hear." He paused again, "And because my daughter asked me to." Logan absorbed this. "Eleanor asked you to promote me," she said, and I'm quoting, "He's the only person in this whole operation who treats me like I have a brain." Vance's expression moved slightly, not quite a smile, but something adjacent. "She is not incorrect about other people." Logan thought about it on the drive home. He thought about it while he made dinner. Spaghetti. Bree's standing request on Fridays, and while Bree talked to him about her week, about the project they were doing on the solar system, about which planet she would live on if she could pick any of them, Saturn because of the rings, and also because she liked the idea of things that look solid but aren't. He thought about it while he read to her and while he sat in the quiet of the apartment after she fell asleep. It was not a hard decision, he knew that. He'd known it in the office, looking at the lake. But he sat with it for a while anyway because it felt like the kind of thing that deserved to be sat with. The journey from $43 to this moment had not been straight. It had not been easy. It had gone through a lot of rooms where he wasn't supposed to be the one who made it through. He thought about the man in the expensive shirt and the gym mat, and the word lucky said under someone's breath. He thought about Bree at the aftercare table, drawing under the fluorescent lights, the last kid there. He called Harmon in the morning and said he would take the position. On the first Friday of February, Logan picked Bree up from school and took her to the Science Museum, which she'd been asking about for a month, which he'd been unable to afford until now. They spent 3 hours there. She stood in front of the model of Saturn for a long time, her face tipped up, absolutely still in the way she went, still only when something had gotten fully inside her attention. "Dad," she said, without looking away from it. "Yeah, do you think the rings feel solid if you're standing on them? Or do you fall through?" Logan thought about it. "I think it depends on where you're standing." Bree considered this. Then she nodded like he'd said something satisfying and reached up and took his hand and pulled him toward the next exhibit, and Logan Hurst held on.